Okay, good. In this one, we'll be learning to find the opposites of an integer. Well, what's an opposite of an integer? Well, first of all, we need to know what's an integer. Integer are those numbers that go from infinity negative to infinity positive. Okay, so by definition, we're going to state that opposites or negatives, we can say that also, because the negative of a number is also mean its opposite. There are simply two numbers that are the same distance. Very important to understand what do we mean by distance. From 0 on the number line, but on opposite sides of it, or of the number line, are called opposites or negatives. That simply means the opposite of an integer. So what does that mean? Well, we can draw a line here, and let us draw our line. This is 0. We have here 1, 2, 3, just roughly 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but these are negatives. The 2 is 2 units away, the negative 2 is 2 units away, and they will go infinitely. Okay, so we'll be addition of integers with unlike signs with this concept. Okay, so how do we do this? So we're going to use this approach and then add the numbers. So addition of integers with unlike signs. What do we mean unlike signs? It means that one of them is positive and one of them is negative. Okay, so for our first example, to explain how we add integers, are as follows. I'm going to use the number 7, positive 7, plus a negative 4. That is equals to how much? In this part, since we have seen already absolute value, what is absolute value, then we're going to be using that concept in the most simplest method to approach this. The absolute value of 7 is simply 7, or the absolute value of positive 7 is 7. The absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4. Okay, so then when we look at this, because they have different signs, we will subtract the smallest from the largest. Okay, so we do that. We now say 7 take away 4, that gives us 3. However, who was the largest value, or which one of them is the largest value, the 7 or the 4? If you have chosen 7, that's correct, and we'll keep the sign of the 7, which is positive, so your solution is positive 3. There's no need to write the positive 3, that is understood. So in other words, what we do when they have different signs, we are to determine their absolute value, and we determine that, and then simply subtract the smallest from the largest. Then, having established that difference in number, we then look at their signs before we did the absolute value. This was positive 7, this was negative 4. Who's larger? 7. So therefore we keep that sign there. Let's go with another example. Negative 7 plus 4. Please take note that I'm using the same kind of numbers. So we look at negative 7. The absolute value of negative 7 is positive 7, and the absolute value of positive 4 is 4. We now subtract 4 from 7, which gives us 3. But who's larger, 7 or the 4? If you're choosing the number 7, then you're right, because of the 7 being larger than the 4, we keep the sign of the 7 before we did the absolute value, which is negative, so we put a negative value here. In other words, this can summarize as to say we keep the sign of the largest value. All right, so this was 7, which is larger than negative 4, so we keep positive 3. A third example, we have 6 plus negative 9. The absolute value of positive 6 is 6 and the absolute value of negative 9 is 9. So we subtract 6 from 9, we end up with 3. And then we look at the two values. Who's larger, 6 or 9? You're choosing 9, then you're right. What was the sign of the 9 before we did the absolute value? It was negative, so therefore your solution is negative 3. Okay, let's look at a fourth example. Negative 35 plus 20. What's the absolute value of negative 35? It's 35. What's the absolute value of positive 20? It's 20. So now we subtract 20 from 35, that gives us 15. So who's larger, 35 or 20? 35. Now, what was the sign of the 35 before we made it absolute? Negative, so this is a negative 15 as a solution. Another example, we have 9 plus negative 5. What's the absolute value of 9? 9. What's the absolute value of negative 5? 5. Okay, so we subtract the 5 from the 9, that gives us 4. Now, who is larger, 9 or the 5? 9. What was the sign of the 9 before we did the absolute? Positive, so the answer is positive. That is the addition of integers with unlike signs, and also looking with the concept of opposite or negative numbers here. Okay.